The nuclear plant humbled me because you come from a very good tertiary institution, you think you've got it all and you think you know it all. Tenacity becomes important. Stay grounded, be clear about what you want to achieve at that point in time, because you never know what's coming next. There's a whole lot of wisdom in having the ability to listen and internalize whatever comes across your way.
Welcome to Energy Conversations. Most of the time on this show, we talk about the energy sector itself, the policy, the systems, and the people building them. Today, we're joined by Loyiso Tyabashe, Group Chief Executive Officer of Necsa, the South African Nuclear Energy Corporation. Loyiso, thank you so much for joining us for this careers conversation.
Thanks, Tawazile.
I'd like to begin with you. So before we get into the work, I'd like to meet the person behind the title, so in not so many words, if you can tell us a bit about who Loyiso is, where do you come from, what shaped you, tell us a bit about your journey.
No, great. Interesting journey. I was born in the Eastern Cape, the old Transkei, grew up in a village, in a town called Tsolo, not far from Mthatha. And in there, as you would imagine in our days, the careers were those. So either become a doctor if you're good in maths, or you become a lawyer or a teacher or whatever. It was those standard jobs. And because we had a hospital nearby in our village, actually, so obviously, with me being good in maths and science at that point in time, I had an aspiration of becoming a medical doctor. Growing up all the way from primary to higher primary, but it was only in high school that my mind changed because I started seeing the work of engineers around, because there were civil engineers constructing a road to the hospital. It was just exciting, different to just wearing white coats and walking around patients, but people out there in the field doing real work, taking measurements, looking at the slopes. It really spoke to what I enjoyed in doing in maths, geometry, algebra, and all those sort of things. So I changed. In standard 8, that's when I changed my career choice from medicine to engineering. That stayed with me until standard 10, which is grade 12 nowadays. And I must say that when I applied to university, engineering was my first choice. Medicine still stayed my second choice because it still looked like a very good thing, positively touching people's lives. That's really the essence of what I wanted to do. I went from the Eastern Cape to the Western Cape to study. I was accepted in UCT, did engineering there, finished my BSc engineering degree in mechanical. And at that point in time, when I finished, I felt I was still young because I had started schooling at a very young age. Back in the days, you could start even when you were 4 years of age. So having matriculated at age 16, I finished my basic degree much young, and my parents were fortunate. I was fortunate to have the parents I had who allowed me to continue with my studies, did my master's degree in mechanical engineering, still at UCT. Very fulfilling. After that, I went to join the automotive sector, spent about 2 years in a company that manufactured automotive components in the form of shock absorbers, the gas sleeves that you find in your boot, those shocks that you find in your boot, catalytic converters as well. So it was a very good career, even though it was short-lived. But I got into nuclear by chance because I wanted something different to automobiles. I found an opportunity at Eskom in Koeberg nuclear plant. I started there in the year 2000, which was very good. I enjoyed my stay. I think the first thing that they did with us was to teach us the nuclear terminology, nuclearize us, convert us from being conventional mechanical, electrical, and other engineers to becoming nuclear engineers. That was a 9-month course that we did inside Eskom, as we were employed by Eskom back in the days. And we could become functional engineers within the nuclear plant. So a lot of studying, a lot of hard work, even though we said we were working, it was very good. I stayed in Eskom for about 21 years. Having done different things almost every 3 to 4 years. I was in operating, I was in maintenance, I was in engineering, I was in oversight, so project management. I did almost everything that you could do in a nuclear power plant when I worked in Eskom. And there was a point where I felt to exit. So I left Eskom in December 2020, started at Necsa in January 2021 in the current role that I'm in. The last 5 years has been a very fulfilling journey in that at that point in time, Necsa was not doing so well. We've managed to recover Necsa to be now a company that we can speak confidently about in terms of governance, finances, performance, and also the outlook into the future that we are looking at bigger and better things right now.
I want to, and I mean, you sound like a nuclear baby, like that it literally shaped you. What was it that, what is it about nuclear? Because there's so many different, I mean, I think getting into an Eskom gives you such a wide range. It's what you could have been involved in. Why nuclear?
Yeah, like I said, it was just by chance. I happened to work in the automotive company in Cape Town. An opportunity came up in Cape Town, and Eskom only has one plant in Cape Town, and that's a nuclear plant, so I was put in there. I actually never thought I was going to stay there for very long.
Because my question is, by luck you get in,
yes,
but what keeps you in 21 years later?
In actual fact, the nuclear plant humbled me because you come from a very good tertiary institution, you think you've got it all and you think you know it all, but you get into the plant, you start seeing and experiencing things that we're learning about, and they take you to basics. And there were two types of training that I had to do to fulfill my final posting in the early 2000s. It was that 9-month training of nuclear training, understanding a neutron, because when you study about electricity, it's about electrons. Now, on the atomic structure, you talk about a neutron, a proton, and an electron. So I understand electrons, but neutrons and protons I didn't understand very well, and nuclear is about those, which are not generally spoken about in the scientific environment. So it became a new lease of life in understanding something different, something that had required a different mindset in terms of being very conservative in your decision making, exploring if you want to do an intervention on a pump. You're not just thinking about stopping the pump and disconnecting things. It's like, what is the impact? So you had to look at multiple aspects. So it calls for more scrutiny being in the nuclear business. And I think that's what kept me. It is the rigor, it is the thoroughness, and it is actually the inherent safety that the technology brings across. Inherent safety, because I always say to people, if you look at a nuclear plant design, if there is a function to be fulfilled, you generally have two independent systems that fulfill the same, totally independent, so that if one fails, the other one kicks in. You actually realize how unsafe normal human nature is. If you drive your vehicle, you've got one braking system. If that braking system fails, I don't think you've got much to save you, even though those systems are designed very well. But in the nuclear industry, as well designed as they are, there is always a concept of redundancy. So it became really a new way of learning life and understanding a well-designed, a well-engineered system that kept my engineering curiosity right through.
Okay. So what would you say, I mean, obviously your engineering skills came in handy, but what is the one skill set or something that you learned on your journey that you didn't necessarily learn conventionally, via qualification or something like that, but something that you've picked up on your journey that you have found to be incredibly important in your career and has probably been a reason for you moving forward as you have?
I think for me, if I can point one thing right now, it would be rigor in decision making. That's been probably that's the most thing that distinguishes nuclear people and non-nuclear people, in that when a decision is arrived at, it has been looked at multiple levels, different perspectives, to make sure that if there is any consequence, it is not impactful, but you always avoid having a negative consequence. So I must say, I think it's just the rigor that has really been enhanced even in my everyday life. I tend to go through things rigorously than I think I did before. So I think that that's probably one thing I can count and say it has really been enhanced by being in the nuclear sector.
It's so interesting. Like there's so many characteristics or mannerisms that we have that you like, were you this person because you studied this, or did you become this person because of what you actually what you came across? Loyiso, when you joined Necsa, and as you said, 2021, January 2021, it was, I suppose it wasn't the easiest time to have joined an
Yeah.
organization. I want to draw from you, from a leadership perspective, what helped you steady you in this journey? What were some of the tools you used to get in and do the work you needed to get to actually having moved Necsa from being, in a very fragile place to profitability? What's that playbook?
Yeah. Very difficult time indeed, because that was just around after COVID. People had not come back to work as a full contingent. Some people are still working from home. And it's very difficult to lead people that you have not seen before that are operating behind the screens. That was the era. We were not used to that. And slowly but surely, people started coming back to work. And but what I did even before there was a full contingent back at work in the following years is that we had virtual meetings. So I think within the first 30 days, I convened a staff meeting. It was a virtual meeting. Felt very unusual because when you have a staff meeting, we have a hall full of people. And one of the most important things that I did was to listen more to what the people were saying. As much as I said, this is me, this is what I think I'm bringing to the company, but most importantly, you've been running this organization, you've seen the good and the worst of it. What do you think we must do? The first thing that I started doing was to issue a survey I think it was within the first 2 months. Just 3 questions. What shall we start doing as an organization? What must we stop doing? And what must we continue doing? And the fourth one is generally anything you want to say. It is very interesting what came out of that survey. I think there were more than 500 respondents out of the 1,700 people at the time. And those are the things that helped craft the strategy that we ended up having from 2021, and we just finished implementing now in March 2026. Because people who run the business, or people who are at the coal face, they really understand what will work better. You don't sit in the boardroom and think you'll tell people that are turning the spanners how to turn a spanner better. What you must bring to them is things that you can do to enhance their work, but they know exactly what needs to be changed. So I think the biggest thing and the biggest lever for me was to listen to the people on the ground, whilst I had in mind what is needed to change the organization. And the platform that I operated from as well was the experience that I had of more than 20 years being in the nuclear business and being in multiple environments, because being in engineering is very different to being in maintenance and operating. So the fact that I'd seen the whole spectrum of the activities within the nuclear environment, especially at a technical level, it gave me good skills to actually come up with a strategy that worked. And now we are embarking the second phase of our strategy, 2026 to 2030, which is about growth in building those different plants that we want to see operating in the 2030s.
Okay, well, that's exciting. And so I guess if as a young person or even anybody looking at it, it's one, listen, because I think there's more to be gained from hearing what others are experiencing or from their experience. But I think what you're also highlighting is don't discount the journey that gets you to the place that you need to walk to, because everything, that entire, from from the nuclear power plant, like humbling you, to now being here, you needed that whole journey.
Every experience along the journey does count. And I drew on a whole lot of things. I was involved in peer review mechanisms while I was still in Eskom, and those really came to life in that at this level, you actually need to have that peer review cap, because you play 2 functions. You play a function of reshaping and directing the organization, but when you sit in the board, you play that oversight. So you need to understand the two roles that you are playing as a CEO. So for me, I think, like you've put it very nicely, every little experience that takes you where you are counts, and you always draw on something in there. And wisdom in listening. I always say I find a whole lot of wisdom in listening. And I think it helps me because I'm introverted by nature. But there's a whole lot of wisdom in having the ability to listen and internalize whatever comes across your way.
Good or bad?
Good.
Sometimes you don't want to listen, but
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of truth in that. And I think probably there's a lot more to be gained in what you perhaps find uncomfortable to hear, because that's probably the greater lessons that you have. Lisa, I want to learn from you here. And I mean, you've had quite a vast career. So, and I think in most careers, every career, every journey has a tough chapter, where things, a setback or a failure. I want to just hear from you. So looking back, what would you say has been your toughest setback or failure? And what do you think it's taught you that you wouldn't have learned in any other way?
Maybe not a failure per se, but the toughest period of my life. I think it was the transition from being in a village to being in a city. From being in a school where I was taught English in Xhosa to a spot where I needed to speak English for the whole day. Exhausting. Having to translate back and forth all the time. It sounds laughable now, but that was the case when I got to varsity. And that was a difficult time because that's probably the year that would have broken me, because the first year of engineering was so tough. Not only because it was tough, but because I had to overcome the cultural changes, the language changes, the way things were done in a city versus in a rural area. So for me, if I were to take any of the biggest growth years, that is the year. To the point that, and I know I didn't mention this, the second training that I got inside the nuclear sphere in Koeberg was that I needed to go and do some training in France in 2002, 2003 for a full year for the specialty that I was going in. In there, we had to learn French because we're in a classroom with French people. So I had to learn basic French, technical French, nuclear French within a 6-month period, and be in a classroom with French people. You are taught in French, you write exams in French, and probably that's the second order, but it was not as difficult as the initial period when I transitioned from Eastern Cape to Western Cape, because it was like deja vu. I could see some of those things coming back in. But I must say, both periods have really strengthened me as an individual in believing in the unbelievable. I never thought I would be able to even understand French, but I could write now exams in French at some point in my life.
There's so much in what you're sharing, right? And I think even the fact that the France trip you were prepared by it by the university trip,
Precisely.
right? So in every season, it's kind of like you're building this muscle, you're building something, and you have to move through it, because for you to move through it, I guess for a young person right now who's wondering, how am I going to get through understanding this? It's to have that vision in your mind to say that what big stage is waiting for you, that this is the training ground that you need to go through.
Yeah. And you'll never know what's coming next. But all I'm saying now, and if I reflect, is that every little experience, however positive or negative, you need to embrace it, because it's building a foundation for your future. So I don't have as many regrets, but I can say that there are many things that have happened in the past that have really helped me and equipped me to be a better person today.
Okay. I want to close off and have you have a conversation with 21-year-old Loyiso, who is beginning his career. He's still trying to figure himself out. He's still studying. He's still going to study. And he is now in that transition. So maybe it's not 21-year-old, he's maybe 18-year-old, and he's just moved from the village, and now he has to go through this difficult season. What is the advice? What is the advice that you would give to him, and I suppose any young person who is beginning to navigate their career and they're finding that, sure, it's not Kansas anymore. Like, this is actually it's a bit tough. What would you say to them?
So for me, the advice I always give is number one, tenacity becomes important. Stay grounded, be clear about what you want to achieve at that point in time, because you never know what's coming next. So if you're doing your engineering degree or whatever other subject you're doing, you need to stay firm in it, because at that point in time, you've got a specific vision. Stay true to it, be disciplined around it. Tenacity with discipline becomes very important. The second thing, which is probably the most important thing, is don't be shy to seek help. Because when you get to, now if I talk about a university, you have tutors, you have tutorial sessions. It's not a sign of weakness to look for support and advice, because sometimes you go to those sessions to reinforce a point, not that you don't know. So I think that space and moment of being vulnerable, in that potentially I don't know this as much as I do, or I don't understand it, that vulnerability is important in life. And I think the difficulty with youngsters is that they never want to look fragile. But I would say, do not be shy to seek help, because that's the only way that you can learn.
Loyiso, thank you, thank you very much. This has been real. This has been exactly the kind of conversation that we wanted to bring to our audience. So thank you so much
Great.
for sharing so generously.
Most welcome.
And to everyone listening, thank you for tuning in for yet another episode of Energy Conversations. And if anything in this conversation landed for you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Somebody who's looking up from where they are currently at and wondering where to from here. And until next time, please do share your questions, your comments below, subscribe and stay connected, and share this episode, and let's keep this conversation going.
Thank you for listening to Energy Conversations, powered by Kani Development Solutions and the African Energy Leadership Center at the Wits Business School.